Welcome to the Ask the Geographer podcast series, brought to you by the Education Department at the Royal Geographical Society with IBG. I'm Rachel, your host, and in each episode, I'll be joined by geographers from across the globe to delve into current events, publications, and research all tied to the fascinating world of geography. Today I am joined by Professor James Evans, Associate Dean for Research at the University of Manchester and former Director of Manchester Urban Institute, whose specialism focuses on the development of smarter and more sustainable cities. Part of James's research has been studying the role of living labs in cities, a method that integrates research and development activities within real-life environments that benefits many different disciplines, including geography. James, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Rachel. Pleasure to be here.
So your work sounds incredibly interesting. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started off as a geographer and I was very interested in sustainability, climate change. And then as I started to look at these issues, I realized cities were absolutely critical to the sustainability of the planet. And I became increasingly interested in the environmental impacts urbanization has. And I started to become more interested in the ways in which cities themselves were developing solutions to some of their sustainability challenges. The way cities grow is not necessarily with sustainability in mind. So how do they try and fix some of the problems around polluted air, poor housing, transport issues as more and more people move to cities and they grow larger and larger? So yeah, the topic I'm interested in is really how cities themselves and groups of people in cities develop solutions to their own problems.
Fantastic. And can you tell us a little bit more about any recent projects you've been working on?
I've worked on a number of projects in specific cities, Manchester, but also cities in Europe, Brussels, Verona, Leipzig, all kinds of places. But the projects have been quite similar in that they've focused on specific neighborhoods and they've worked with communities who live in those neighborhoods and city authorities to identify specific challenges. They might be around too much traffic, not enough green space, too much noise, things that people who live there care about and the city themselves want to improve. And then we go in and set up these things called living labs, which are kind of real world test environments. So we might say, okay, we're going to take this street. We're going to work with people to understand what the problem is. And we're going to work with people to then try and develop a solution. It might be a crossing or a cycle lane, or it might be planting. It can depend on the area. Different cities have different possibilities in terms of how much space there is to work with, whether there's areas you can plant in, what the community themselves are interested in doing, and what they want. And you come up with a solution, and then you try and put that solution in place, and then you try and figure out whether it works. And that might involve some physical monitoring. So you might put up a traffic sensor to see whether it encourages people to walk, discourages cars. You might put up an air quality sensor, see if the air's become cleaner. But then you also talk to the people who live there and the people who use the street and ask whether it's improved life for them, whether they prefer it. And then you come up with an idea and understanding of whether it's worked in that place at that point in time. Sometimes it needs tweaking, and then you can change it slightly and then see whether that works. And then hopefully when you've got something that works, you can turn that into a broader recommendation that could be used in other places in that city with the same problem, or in other cities. So there's that idea that you try something in the real world in collaboration with the people there. You figure out whether it works and you try and scale it up from there if it does. That's the kind of theory. We've done that in a number of cities in recent projects.
Wonderful. And I think that some of the skills you've just identified there is very much Things that our audience will definitely understand in inquiry-based learning. But why do you think studying smarter and more sustainable cities is an essential part of geography?
That's a really good question. So, I mean, I very much come from the sustainability side of things. How do we create places that are good for people and good for the planet? And I'm a firm believer that usually the one goes hand in hand with the other. What is good for people is usually good for the planet. And cities are where most people live. So if you want to improve most people's lives most quickly, you get most bang for your buck by working in cities. So as a geographer, I'm concerned with places and high quality places and places that create happy, healthy people. So I'm interested in cities and making places better. The smarter bit is really around how you use technology to help deliver that goal. And that might be through smart transport. It could be apps to enable bike sharing. It could be something like Uber. It could be solar panels and smart energy that shares energy between houses so it's more efficient. My passion is sustainability, but so much of the exciting opportunity in this space is now digital that I've done a lot of projects looking at how digital technology can help cities, places, communities become more sustainable. So I think as geographers, it's a kind of, we're interested in places and creating good places, and technology clearly has a major part to play in that.
Definitely. We mentioned in your introduction, and you've lightly touched on this already, your research methods use something called living labs to generate real life environments. Can you tell us how this helps us understand how cities can be smarter and more sustainable?
Yeah, so cities have, they have a range of challenges, right? But they're complex places. The challenges all come together. So there might be challenges around waste collection, littering. There might be challenges around air pollution, noise pollution. There might be challenges around mobility. There might not be bus services. There might be big main roads that people can't get across. There might be challenges around housing, poor housing quality, poor insulation, too cold, damp in winter, causing health issues. All of this comes together at once in cities. Whereas when you think about how governments work and how research works, all of these problems are tackled separately by different departments and different disciplines. So living labs are quite an innovative methodology in the sense that they don't start from the abstract problems separately. They start from a real world environment and they say, right, let's test some things out in this place with these people. And it could be a building, it could be a street, it could be a neighborhood. But you go and you try and talk to people there. You can't talk to all of them. That's obviously a challenge. You want to make sure you're trying to understand the needs of all the community, although we often talk about the community like it's a single thing. It never is. There's always multiple overlapping communities in a place. There's some people who aren't really in any communities. But you do your best to try and understand, is there some kind of shared problem that everyone feels is an issue here? And then you say, right, what could we come up with to fix this? And that's where you might bring in some experts who might come in and say, well, in this other place, they've tried this. You might see some pictures. You might look at some evidence of what's worked elsewhere. And you do something called co-production, where you produce a solution with the community. So you co-produce it together rather than experts coming in and saying, this is the answer and imposing it. You say, here's some things we could do. What might that look like here? And then the community would say, we like this, we don't like that, or maybe could we have this, but in this other way? And then you put it into place and test it, trial it, measure it, monitor it, see whether people are happy with it, see whether it works to address the problem in some way. And in this way, you figure out solutions that actually work in a real world setting, in that place, for that community. So it's highly geographical. It's about coming up with things in place that work in that place for that place.
So thinking about that place, have you got any examples that you could give us where your research has made an impact on an urban area?
So, I mean, we've done projects that have identified potential solutions and helped put them into place. Some work we supported in Manchester was around putting in some cycle lanes, and it was on a road with a lot of buses. And buses and cyclists aren't always a great combination because the buses are constantly trying to pull into bus stops to pick people up. So they're cutting across cycle lanes, and then the cyclists have to pull out into the road to get around the bus. You get cyclists getting crushed and knocked off, and the buses don't like it much either. So no one's winning. So about 50 years ago in the Netherlands and in Sweden, they developed the idea of a floating bus stop whereby the cycle lane goes behind the bus stop so that the buses aren't cutting across the cyclists when they pick people up. But this, even though it's been done for a long time in these other countries, this is completely new in the UK. No one had ever done it before. So there was a lot of anxiety and concern. How would this work? What about the pedestrians trying to get to the bus stop? They'd have to walk across a cycle lane. Wouldn't they get hit by cyclists? So there's lots of worries about this. So they put the bus stops in eventually, just two of them, these floating bus stops, and they monitored them heavily for collisions, but also for user feedback from pedestrians, cyclists and bus drivers. And there was worries about people crossing the cycle lane to get to the bus stop. So they decided to put in mini zebra crossings across the cycle lane with the poles, with the lights on and everything. They don't have them in the Netherlands. They don't have them in Sweden, but they have them here in Manchester because that's what people here felt was required to make them safe. So there's small examples like that we've helped with, and we obviously as a university we're good at measuring and monitoring things, so we often help with that. So the council here has put in pedestrian zones and low traffic neighbourhoods, and we've helped monitor traffic, whether it encourages walking and cycling, air quality sensors to see whether the air quality has improved in different ways. And then, of course, that's useful for them because they have a solid evidence base that they can then use to say to the people they get funding from, yes, it has achieved the following objectives. And then hopefully that can enable more of these schemes to happen.
Wonderful. And if there was just one thing that cities could adopt to become more sustainable, what do you think it would be, and why do you think it would be that one?
I saw this question when you sent them through, and I had to think quite hard about this because just one thing is really tough. But I think the thing I will go for is the idea of active travel. So this is the idea that you try and encourage people to walk or cycle or scoot or skateboard or anything that involves them moving around under their own steam. Because using cars for short journeys in cities is a disaster from a sustainability point of view. More people are injured and killed by cars than almost anything else. And then they create air pollution, which is particularly harmful for children, noise pollution, which is particularly harmful for our mental health. Streets with heavy traffic tend to have far lower connections between people who live on those streets. You're much less likely to know your neighbour. People don't want to walk, they don't want to stand in the street. Whereas if you can get people walking and cycling and scooting and so on, it's good for their mental health, it's good for their physical health, it's good for interactions and combating loneliness. Children, research has shown children that have walked or cycled to school are far more able to pay attention when they get to school. So the combined, the disbenefits of motorised travel and the massive number of benefits of active transport make it something that creates a lot of wins. It's also something most people can do quite easily. It's not like installing solar panels. It doesn't require the government to change laws. It's something we can all do. And it doesn't have to be everything all the time, everywhere. Even if you just substitute one trip for walking, you're making a difference. And finally, it's visible. So I've done projects working on energy, smart energy, ICT stuff, building materials. But the projects that connect with people most are the transport projects, because everyone moves around, right? It's experienced. Everyone experiences it. Even if you don't get a bus, you see a bus. Even if you don't drive, you're affected by cars. We all have to get around. So it really connects with people. And it's a really good way in. Everyone can do something about it. Everyone sees it. And it can get people interested in all the other things. You take a walk to the shop instead of the car, you're helping fix air pollution. So that's the one for me, transport.
For anyone who is listening and wants to find out more, where would you suggest they go or do?
Oh, it's a really interesting question, this one. I'm going to start off with a couple of recent reports that I think are truly excellent around this topic. One is a recent report by Friends of the Earth, came out this year, called The Fairness Test. It's about climate policy that starts from people, and it talks about better transport, cleaner transport, public transport. It talks about how to make housing more sustainable, make it warmer, healthier. And it's good because it talks about sustainability measures in cities that help address poverty and poor health at the same time. And that's absolutely the way we need to tackle sustainable cities. We've got to find things that are better for the environment and people, all people, at the same time. A second report that's definitely worth looking at that came out just, I think, 2 months ago is called A Breath of Fresh Air, Responding to the Health Challenges of Modern Air Pollution. This was from the Royal College of Physicians. It's about air pollution, but a lot of it is about cities, how we need to change cities, change transport, the things we can do living in cities, the connection between sustainability and health, and the fact it tends to be poorer communities, more vulnerable communities that are hit hardest by a lot of these unsustainable activities. So that one's great. Another place I'd direct you to is the World Resource Institute Ross Centre for Sustainable Cities. They're an absolute wealth of information about climate adaptation, energy efficiency, urban mobility, case studies, publications, and so on. And then the final thing, and as a geographer, I'm a big believer in going to places that have done interesting things and experiencing it for yourself. People can read reports about things that work. They can listen to other people tell them about things that work. But there's no substitute for actually going somewhere, seeing a different reality and experiencing it, for making you really feel, oh yes, this is good and it's actually possible. There's that whole saying, beloved of politicians, seeing is believing. And it's true, but experiencing is even more believing. So if you're lucky enough to go somewhere like Paris or Copenhagen, or get on one of the bikes, hire a bike, cycle around, see what it's like to be in a place that's designed for a different form of transport other than the motor car. That there is a different world that's possible, but unless you're lucky enough to see it and experience it, it's hard to believe sometimes.
Sounds like there's some great field work can be planned around that one.
Oh yeah, definitely.
James, thank you for your time today. This area within geography is essential for the sustainable development of areas where approximately 56% of the global population live, and is projected to continue to grow over the next few decades. And by making cities smarter and more sustainable, urban areas can play their part in reducing waste, limiting their impact on resources, and help mitigate the impacts of climate change. Thank you so much for your time today. We really, really appreciate your points of view.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this podcast, don't forget to subscribe to the Ask the Geographer podcast series on soundcloud.com or your preferred streaming platform. Dive deeper into the world of geography and stay informed with our wide range of resources, many of which are available for free. School membership grants access to even more resources, including online lectures and supporting materials for both teachers and learners. Explore our resources and discover our additional offers for education at www.rgs.org/schools.